selling more oil at higher prices ought to be the stuff of dreams for a petrostate. For Russia, it is a sign of a new, punishing phase in its war with Ukraine. Months of Ukrainian drone strikes on refineries have crimped Russia's ability to produce refined fuels, such as diesel and petrol, and turned the world's third-largest oil producer into an importer of petrol. Russian oil companies have tried to pare their losses by selling unrefined oil overseas, pushing exports to a new highs in 2024. Despite the U.S. administration's fears that the global oil and fuel market could be destabilized, the price dynamic for both categories of commodities to date does not suggest that the Ukrainian strikes have driven prices up. On the contrary, the need to reduce processing and the impossibility of storing crude have forced Russian exporters to increase exports. At the same time, the refinery shutdowns have driven down sales of petroleum products abroad, resulting in losses primarily for Russian companies. The Ukrainian attacks and the resulting drop in fuel production have created a number of challenges for the Kremlin, including the need to deal with logistical tensions, strengthen air defense, and increase imports of petroleum products. Given the political importance of fuel availability, reduced processing has forced the Russian government to use tools of intervention in order to ensure that the market is adequately saturated. For example, it has forced the fuel sector to redirect supplies onto the domestic market at the expense of the foreign markets. Should the Ukrainian strikes continue and cause more temporary shutdowns at refineries, the government will probably have to step up its intervention, and that will generate costs for the state and may lead to market imbalances. Refineries are a convenient target. Oil is seen as the mainstay of the Russian economy, so elements of the oil industry are obvious and symbolic targets. Unlike oil fields, which are vast with dispersed islands of equipment and located in remote Siberia, refineries appear to be a far more rewarding target. Refineries cost tens of billions of dollars to build, they are large targets and therefore hard to miss, and there is a lot of flammable and explosive matter, making substantial fire damage probable after the hit. There are also plenty of Russian refineries relatively close to Ukrainian territory. From the attack planner's standpoint, it would be ideal if Russia were not only to lose export volumes, but also experience difficulties in supplying enough fuel for its army and economy. To seriously affect Russia's refined oil market, significant attacks are required, as Russian refining capacity is 2.5 times bigger than its fuel consumption. Evidently, the ongoing refinery attacks are working as Russia implemented a ban on refined exports. From the attack planner's standpoint, it would be ideal if Russia were not only to lose export volumes, but also experience difficulties in supplying enough fuel for its army and economy. 80 years ago, US and British military planners had a similar idea, to bring Germany and its army to its knees by targeting oil refineries in Germany, Austria, and Romania. For a year from May 1944, over 200,000 tons of bombs were dropped in more than 600 raids, with about 2.5% landing on refinery installations. Even under that scale of attack, after the initial shock, German fuel production stabilized at about 40% of its previous level. News reports show that damaged units at many of the refineries were brought back in operation after 2 to 3 weeks of repairs, and Bloomberg reported refining volumes are down from their peaks but above the troughs and again within the customary volume band. But the capacity to repair refineries is severely restricted now in Russia. The equipment and technology is largely dependent on Western companies, who have exited Russia since the illegal invasion of Ukraine. Some shortages of fuel in Russia became evident in early 2024. Russia did import some volumes of gasoline from Belarus, which was widely celebrated by the media. But the volume in question was a single trainload in 1 week, less than 0.5% of 1 week's consumption, while Russia kept exporting naphtha, straight-run gasoline, and diesel. Considering that not a single unit converting naphtha into gasoline was subject to an attack, that import was most likely for logistical reasons, rather than because of a countrywide shortage of fuels. Necessary government intervention. The drop in fuel production caused by the Ukrainian attacks has forced the Russian government to take numerous measures aimed at preventing prices from rising above the average inflation rate in the country. It should be noted that thanks to the government's intervention and the industry's flexible attitude, Russia has effectively managed to avoid shortages on the market during the period of the most serious shutdowns of its refining capacity as a result of the Ukrainian strikes. The Russian government's first countermeasure was to impose a ban on gasoline exports. It decided to do so on the 27th of February, even before the Ukrainian drone attacks escalated. Alongside this decision, it also raised the requirement for producers to sell diesel on the domestic exchange from the previous 12.5% to 16% of the total production volume. However, these regulatory changes failed to halt the trend of rising wholesale fuel prices, which reflected fears of local shortages as a result of uneven market supply. On the 22nd of March, the 2nd of April and the 25th of April, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak hosted government meetings which were attended by officials from the country's oil and fuel companies and Russian railways. According to press releases, they discussed the issue of prioritizing fuel supplies for the domestic market. Unofficial media reports said that the government had instructed its subordinate institutions to give priority to fuel supplies over other categories of goods, and also told them to increase the financial penalties for delays in unloading railway wagons with petroleum products. In the end, the government managed to avoid shortages precisely because it prioritized redirecting production from intact refineries and reducing fuel exports, which allowed it to saturate the domestic market. The industry also tapped into the reserves it had already accumulated. Supplies from abroad were important as well. According to Reuters, Russia increased its imports of gasoline from Belarus several-fold. This report was later confirmed by decision-makers. Furthermore, there were unconfirmed reports that Russia had asked Kazakhstan to set up a fuel reserve which could be released in the event of shortages in the Russian Federation. Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil refineries and facilities, particularly through drone strikes, are having notable impacts on Russia's economy, fuel costs, and its commitments to OPEC oil cut agreements. Impact on fuel costs in Russia. There are documented disruptions to fuel supply in Russia, most notably evident in banning the export of refined products and extending that ban recently, to 2025. Ukrainian drone strikes have targeted key oil refineries and storage facilities within Russia, causing significant disruptions to the supply chain. These attacks lead to temporary shutdowns of production and processing facilities, which in turn can create local fuel shortages and disrupt distribution networks. There is an increase in domestic prices in Russia as refined fuel volumes decrease with refineries and storage facilities are being struck. The disruptions and damage caused by these attacks have resulted in increased operational costs for refineries and a decrease in fuel supply. As a result, fuel prices within Russia have seen upward pressure, leading to increased costs for consumers and businesses alike. This price increase has a ripple effect, potentially raising the cost of goods and services across various sectors of the economy. Repeated attacks create a sense of uncertainty in the market. Fears of supply disruptions can lead to speculative behavior, where traders might drive up prices in anticipation of further shortages, compounding the problem of rising fuel costs. The easy guide on the economic impact of drone strikes on oil facilities. Direct economic losses. The damage to oil infrastructure leads to direct economic losses due to repair costs, downtime, and loss of production. Each damaged facility represents not only immediate repair costs but also lost revenue from the oil that cannot be processed or exported. Here's a detailed analysis of the situation. Impact on exports. Russia is a significant exporter of oil, and any reduction in its ability to process and export oil impacts its export revenues. Given the importance of oil to the Russian economy, reduced exports can lead to a decrease in foreign exchange earnings, which can strain the country's budget and reserves. Broader economic impact. The oil industry is a major contributor to the Russian economy, and any instability in this sector can have wide-reaching effects. These can include reduced investment in the oil sector, job losses, and a negative impact on related industries such as transport and logistics. Additionally, the need to allocate more resources to defend infrastructure or repair damaged facilities diverts funds from other areas of the economy. There's a substantial pressure on adhering to OPEC+ oil output cut agreements. Putin is fighting a losing battle balancing production and revenue needs to pay for his war in Ukraine. The OPEC+ agreements, which include Russia, aim to manage oil production to stabilize global oil prices. With a tax on its oil facilities, Russia faces the challenge of balancing its commitment to these agreements with the need to maintain its oil revenues. Damaged infrastructure and reduced production capacity may make it difficult for Russia to adhere to agreed production cuts, as it needs to maximize its oil output to compensate for losses. There is the potential for increased crude output to counteract the economic impact of the attacks. Russia might feel compelled to increase production to stabilize its revenue, even if this goes against OPEC+ agreements. Such actions could strain relationships within OPEC+ and lead to disagreements over production quotas, potentially destabilizing global oil markets. In terms of strategic repositioning, these ongoing disruptions might push Russia to reconsider its strategies within OPEC+. This could lead to a shift in the dynamics of the global oil market. Conclusion. The Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian oil facilities have a multifaceted impact, affecting domestic fuel prices, the broader economy, and Russia's role within the global oil market. Russia has now extended its ban on refined product exports, which continues to have a catastrophic impact on refineries, as it is forced to sell the products it still can at a heavily capped and reduced rate to the Russian internal market. The damage and uncertainty these attacks create not only strain Russia's economic resources but also challenge its ability to adhere to international agreements like those with OPEC+. Russia does not have the capacity to store large amounts of crude oil, and with refinery capacity now substantially degraded, Russia has to export the crude, increasing their exports of crude. This is contrary to the output cuts Russia agreed to with OPEC+. As these attacks continue, they are likely to increase economic pressures within Russia, leading to potential shifts in both domestic and international policy approaches.